The room was cold, but her hands were colder. She sat on the edge of the metal seat, wrists still bound by silver cuffs. Her skin was a soft shade of lavender, her long silver hair tangled from travel. Her name was Syria, and she had not spoken since. She left her home planet. 2 guards stood near the exit, their eyes straight, but their thoughts restless. They had never seen someone so quiet, so broken. She was not a criminal. She was not dangerous. She was just a girl given away by her own family. The door opened. She looked up, eyes tired but alert. An older human woman entered with a file in hand and soft shoes that made no sound. She spoke gently. "You will meet him soon. He is not what the stories say. Eat something before you go." She placed a tray in front of her, with warm bread and a bowl of soup. Syria did not move. She kept staring at the floor. The woman sighed and left without waiting for a thank you. This was Earth. This was the place her father feared. This was the place her people whispered about at night. She was told humans were heartless. They took what they wanted and left nothing behind. They burned forests and swallowed stars. They destroyed her father's fleet in one battle. Now they came for his daughter as payment. Syria had begged him not to sign the contract. She had cried at his feet, but he had already used the ink, already made the deal. 1 daughter in exchange for protection. 1 daughter for peace. Now she sat here, waiting to meet the man she was forced to marry. The guards received a signal. They stood straight and opened the second door. A man walked in. He was tall, wearing black boots and a jacket too big for this warm room. His hair was short, his eyes quiet. Didn't speak. He looked at Syria for a moment. Then he turned to the guards and said something they didn't expect. "Take off her chains." The kofar Yefer quoted at Syria for a moment. Then he turned to the guards and said something they didn't expect. "Take off her chains." Guards hesitated. The man repeated the words without raising his voice. They obeyed. The silver cuffs opened. With a soft sound, Syria didn't move. Her arms dropped to her lap. She didn't know what to say or do. The man walked closer. He looked at her for a second longer. Then he removed his coat and placed it over her shoulders. It was warm, smelled like firewood and something calm. He turned and walked toward the door. Before leaving, he spoke without turning back. "No one owns you here." Then he left. Syria sat still. Her hands no longer bound the coat, heavy around her thin frame, the warmth sinking into her skin. Her breath slowed, her eyes burned again. But this time, she didn't cry from fear. She cried from confusion. No one had ever spoken to her like that, not even her own people, not even her father. For a moment, she forgot the contract, forgot the chains. She only remembered the look in the man's eyes. He hadn't looked at her like a trophy, not like a servant, not like a prisoner. He had looked at her like someone who deserved peace. That night, she was taken to his home. It was outside the city, a quiet place with stone walls and warm lights. She expected more guards, more rules. But the driver dropped her at the gate and drove away. She opened the gate herself, walked the path herself. The door was unlocked inside. The lights were dim. A table had been set, 2 plates, 2 chairs. A fire burned in the corner. The air smelled like soup and herbs. No servants, no voices, only silence. She stood in the doorway, not sure if she was allowed to enter. Then the man appeared. Again, still quiet, still in that black jacket. He walked past her without a word, sat down at the table, and waited. She stepped in, closed the door behind her, sat across from him. Neither spoke. He poured her water. She watched his hands, strong but calm. She touched the spoon, lifted it, tasted the soup. It was warm, not perfect, but it felt like something made for her. He watched her but didn't stare. She looked up and asked, "Why did you accept the contract?" He didn't answer right away. He took a breath, then looked at the fire. Some debts are heavy, some promises must be kept. He didn't say more. She didn't ask more. The silence returned, but it no longer felt empty. It felt like the beginning of something new. Syria woke up to sunlight on her face. She wasn't used to real windows. For years, her family lived behind walls, behind shields, behind fear. But here, soft light poured into the room without warning. She blinked and sat up. The bed was large too. Large for one person. The sheets were warm, clean, and smelled like fresh air. She looked around and saw no guards, no locked doors, no cameras, only silence. She stood and walked barefoot across the wooden floor. The silence was heavy. But it wasn't cold. It felt like the house itself was sleeping. She stepped into the hallway, following the smell of something cooking in the kitchen. The man stood near a pan. He flipped something on the stove, then turned to her. He didn't smile. He didn't speak, but he pulled out a chair at the table. Syria sat down. The table was already set for two. There was bread, fruit, and a hot drink with steam rising. Slowly, he placed a plate in front of her, then sat across from her and started eating. She stared at him, then at the food, then picked up a piece of bread. "Why are you doing this?" Her voice was quiet. He paused, but didn't look up. He kept eating, then said, "Because you look like you haven't been treated like a person in a long time." She lowered her eyes. Her hands shook as she picked up the cup. It was the first time someone noticed after breakfast. She walked through the house. Each room told a story, a library full of old books, a small workshop filled with tools and broken gadgets, a spare room with drawings of stars on the walls. She paused outside a door that was slightly open. Inside was something different. No decorations, no color, just shelves filled with boxes and a desk covered in dust. She stepped inside. On the desk there were old photos. One showed the man in a military uniform. Another showed him beside a young alien boy with blue skin and bright yellow eyes. They were laughing, not just smiling, real laughter, frozen in time. She heard the floor behind her creak. The man stood at the door, watching her. "You knew my kind before Mesh said it without fear." He nodded slowly. "He was my brother, not by blood, but by choice." "What happened?" The man didn't answer. He stepped into the room, picked up the photo, and looked at it for a long time. "He saved my life. He didn't have to, but he did. No one ever thanked him after he died. I made a promise, if someone like him ever needed safety, I would give it." Syria felt something tighten in her chest. She wasn't sure what it was: grief, guilt, gratitude. She turned and left the room without another word. Later that day, she sat by the window outside. The man was fixing something near the fence, a broken light. His hands moved with slow care. She watched him for a long time. There was no anger in his movements, no demand for anything. He worked like someone who had built everything with his own hands, brick by brick. Hour by hour she thought about her own people, how they lived in tall towers and gave orders, how they used promises like weapons, how they sold peace with their daughters. She looked down at her hands. No chains, just silence. When he came back inside, she met him at the door. She held out a towel. He took it without speaking. Their fingers touched for a second longer than needed. She didn't pull away that evening. They sat at the table again. He served soup this time. She picked up her spoon and said, "Thank you." He looked at her, then nodded once. They ate in silence, but the silence had changed. It wasn't empty anymore. It was full of things unspoken. After dinner, he went to the library. She followed. She picked a book from the shelf, something with old paper and faded ink. He sat on one side of the couch. She sat on the other, both reading, both breathing in the same quiet air. Before she slept that night, she stood in front of the mirror. She didn't see a prisoner, not a payment, not a girl given away. She saw someone learning how to exist without fear. The rain tapped softly against the glass as Syria stood by the window. She watched the garden turn dark with each falling drop. It had been 3 days since she arrived, 3 quiet days, 3 strange days, and yet she didn't feel trapped. She felt something else, something she didn't understand yet. The human man moved through the house like a ghost, always calm, always quiet. He didn't ask questions. He didn't demand anything from her, but he noticed everything. When she skipped meals, he left fruit near her door. When she woke from dreams shaking, she found warm tea waiting on the table. She had lived her whole life under rules. Now there were none, and that frightened her more than chains ever did. That morning, she woke before the sun. The house was silent as always, but something inside her was loud, a pull, a question she had buried since the moment she saw that photo. She went back to the room with the half-open door. the one filled with forgotten memories, the one he never locked, but never entered either. The dust had settled again since her last visit. The air was still, as if the room was holding its breath. She stepped closer to the shelves. Each box had markings, human names, dates. A few had strange tags written in her own language. She opened one slowly. Inside was a drawing. A child's hand had drawn two figures. One was clearly human, the other was alien. They held hands under a star. A small signature rested in the corner. It was not in human letters. Syria sat down. She touched the paper like it was made of glass. This child had once lived here, played here, called this place home. The door creaked. She didn't turn. She knew who it was. He spoke softly. He drew that when he was 8. She looked up. His voice was heavier than usual, but not angry. Was he your brother? He was more than that. He was my family, even when the world said we weren't. Stood slowly, looked around the room. There were signs everywhere. A small blanket folded on the shelf. A cracked toy hidden in a drawer. Even a name carved into the wall near the floor. What happened to him? The human walked to the window. His back was straight, his hands in his pockets. We were in a war zone evacuating civilians. He was helping. He didn't have to be there. But he refused to leave me behind. When the roof fell, he pushed me out first, and he stayed under it. Syria felt her chest tighten. Her fingers curled without her noticing. They never honored him, never spoke his name, just called him collateral. He saved 100 lives that day. But no one remembers except youth. Man turned toward her, his face calm, but his eyes were not. You remind me of him. Not just because of how you look, but the way you stay quiet, the way you keep everything locked inside. She took a breath. For the first time since she arrived, she wanted to say something real. He was lucky not to die, but to have you even now. She walked toward the photo, lifted it gently, and placed it upright on the desk. Then she looked around the room. Again, this wasn't just memory. It was unfinished grief. When she turned to leave, he stopped her with a question. Do you want to know why I accepted the contract? She nodded. Because I heard who your father was. What he did during the war. I wanted to see for myself if anything good could come from that bloodline. He paused, then added, but when I saw you, I didn't see him. I saw someone lost. And I wanted to give her what no one gave my brother, a choice. She stood there, heartful, words trapped behind her teeth. Then she said something he didn't expect. I choose to stay, not because I have to, but because this place feels more honest than anywhere I've known. He nodded once. Nothing more. She left the room. But that night, as she closed her eyes, she saw the boy's face in her mind, and for the first time in her life, she felt like she belonged to something real. The wind had changed. Syria felt it in her chest before she heard the sound. A low hum began to rise in the distance. Not a storm, not a ship from Earth, something different. She stood in the garden, barefoot on soft grass, watering the flowers that had begun to bloom under the morning sun. The air shifted. She looked up. A silver ship was lowering beyond the trees, silent, smooth. Too clean to belong to humans. It was one of theirs, her kind. She dropped the watering can and ran toward the front of the house. She didn't knock. She walked in fast. The man was sitting near the window, reading again. He closed the book and looked up at her. They're here. He stood without a word outside. The ship landed in the open field. 3 guards stepped out, their armor marked with her family's crest behind them. A tall man walked down the ramp slowly. He wore royal cloth, but his shoulders sagged with age. His eyes were tired. It was her father. Syria froze. She had not seen him since the day he handed her over like a bag of coins. That memory still burned in her bones. Her father stopped a few steps away. He looked at the man beside her, then at her face. You can come home now. The contract is void. Another payment has been arranged. You are no longer required to stay here. Syria said nothing. The wind moved through her hair. The birds had gone silent. The man beside her did not speak either. He stood calm, hands at his sides, eyes watching everything. Her father spoke again. We made mistakes. We chose poorly, but we are correcting them. Come back. You don't belong in this place. Syria Looked down at her hands. No chains, no cuffs, only skin. She remembered the first night. How? She sat in silence, how she expected to be treated like a thing. But he never touched her without need, never raised his voice, never locked a door. He gave her space. He gave her silence. He gave her time. She stepped forward. Her father opened his arms. But she didn't go to him instead. She turned to the man beside her. He met her eyes but said nothing. His silence asked her one question, only one. Do you choose? She turned back to her father. You want me to come back because you think I'm still yours. But I was never yours too. So not to him, not to anyone. Her voice didn't shaking, not going back, not now. Not ever. The guards behind her father shifted their feet. One of them reached forward. Syria didn't move. But the human stepped in front of her. No words, just one step. The guard paused, looked to the father. The father raised a hand, signaling him to stop. He looked at her again. So, this is your new home with him? Syria nodded. With someone who never called me a burden. With someone who sees me as more than a deal. Her father looked smaller now. His voice cracked as he spoke again. You will regret this, maybe, but at least this time, the regret will be mine, not yours. She turned around without another word. The man followed her. They walked back to the house together inside. She sat down slowly. Her hands trembled a little. He poured her a glass of water, placed it in front of her, then sat across the table like he always did. He didn't ask if she was all right. He didn't tell her she was brave. He only said, you didn't have to do that. I know, but I wanted to. They sat in silence again. But this silence felt like something earned, like a line had been crossed. And now they stood on the other side. Together. Syria felt something rise in her chest. Not fear, not anger. Something warmer. She wasn't a guest anymore. Not a deal, not a debt. She was exactly where she chose to be. The house was quiet again, but the silence had changed it. No longer felt like two strangers walking around each other. Now it felt like something gentle, like the stillness after a storm. Like peace that had been fought for. Syria stood in the kitchen, her fingers brushing over the wooden counter. She had cleaned it without being asked. She didn't know why. Maybe because it made her feel useful. Maybe because she wanted the space to feel more like hers. Had gone outside before sunrise. She watched him from the window as he worked near the fence, fixing the lights again, even though no one had broken them. She noticed his movements, slow but steady. Not the kind of strength that came from war, but from healing, from rebuilding, from choosing to keep going. The scarf she wore around her neck had once belonged to him. She found it in a drawer and took it without asking. It smelled like firewood and metal. It reminded her of the first night, the night he placed his coat on her shoulders without a word. The sun rose higher. The ground stayed cold. He wiped sweat from his forehead with the back of his arm. His breath left white clouds in the air. She didn't think too long. She just grabbed a warm towel from the hook, wrapped a fresh cup of tea, and stepped outside, her bare feet pressed into the frosted grass. She walked slowly, each step pulling her closer to something she didn't have a name for. He looked up when he saw her, but he didn't speak. He stood still, waiting. She reached out, handed him the towel first. He took it, then the cup. He held it carefully, then her fingers brushed his, and she didn't pull away for the first time. She looked him in the eyes without fear, and he didn't look away either. You didn't have to bring this, I know. But I wanted to. He nodded once, then drank the tea slowly. She watched steam rise from the cup. Her fingers were still tingling. Something small had shifted. Something quiet but real that evening. The house felt warmer. She helped cook for the first time, chopping vegetables, tasting the broth, asking questions. He answered with short words but soft eyes. She smiled once, and he noticed he didn't say anything. But he noticed they ate together again. But it no longer felt like two people filling space. It felt like a shared rhythm, like breath and heartbeat moving together after dinner. They sat in the living room. The fire crackled softly. She sat closer than usual, their shoulders almost touching. She watched the flames. He watched her reflection in the glass. Can I ask something? Anything. Why do you live out here away from the others? Looked at the fire for a while, then said, because quiet doesn't lie. She nodded slowly. She understood silence could be cruel, but it could also be honest. She looked at his hands again, rough from work, marked by time, but never raised against her. She reached out very slowly, touched the back of his hand with her fingers. Light as a whisper, he didn't move. Her voice was soft. "I'm not used to safety. Not even when I was young. Not even with my own people." He turned his palm upward, gently closed his fingers around hers, then let go, not because he wanted distance, but because he respected space. That moment was enough. The touch was enough. When she went to bed, she lay awake, staring at the ceiling, thinking about his hand, the warmth, the choice. She wasn't falling in love, not yet, but something else had started, something that needed no words, no promises, just truth and trust. For the first time in her life, she trusted someone without fear. Syria was learning how to breathe without looking over her shoulder. Each morning felt lighter, each step softer. She watered the plants. She folded the laundry. She read human books and wrote her thoughts in a small journal he had given her without saying a word. The house no longer felt borrowed. It felt quiet in a good way, like it had accepted her until someone knocked on the door. It wasn't the sound that startled her. It was the sharpness. The rhythm was too perfect, too official, not like the way the man knocked on doors, not like how birds landed on the windowsill. She looked through this small glass panel near the door. A man in a dark suit stood outside, tall, clean, expression blank. She didn't open it right away, but the door opened anyway. From behind her, he had returned from the woods and had already seen the car outside. He stepped in front of her gently and opened the door himself. Man in the suit showed a badge, government seal. No smile. "We're checking on compliance. Just a routine visit." The human didn't invite him in, but the man stepped through the door without waiting. Syria stayed back. She watched from the corner of the room as the visitor looked around. He glanced at the kitchen, the books, the cups on the table. He noted the 2 pairs of shoes by the door. He stopped in front of the fireplace and turned toward them. "You signed a peace contract with her family. Took her in as repayment. Now we need proof." The agreement was more than words. The human folded his arms. He said nothing. The agent kept going. "There are reports that the girl was forced. Reports that this arrangement is temporary. If it's not real, if she isn't truly bonded to you, we will need to take her for questioning." Syria's stomach twisted. She had finally started to feel like she belonged, and now someone wanted to tear that away. The agent took a small scanner from his pocket. "May I speak with her alone?" The human stepped between them without touching him. His voice was quiet. "You can ask her right here, in front of me." The agent raised an eyebrow. "That's not standard procedure." The human said nothing, but he didn't move either. Syria stepped forward. Her voice came out steady. "Ask me anything." The agent looked at her, then at the man beside her. "Are you here willingly? Is this marriage real? It wasn't at first, but it is now. Do you want to leave with me?" Tilted his head slightly. "Would you agree to official bonding right now, to make this legal on all records?" The silence was thick, even. The wind outside had gone still. Syria looked at the man. He was calm, waiting. Then she stepped forward, her voice soft but clear. "Yes, I want to bond with him. I choose it fully." The agent blinked, as if he had not expected that. He tapped something on his device. "Then you will both need to register with the council within 3 days, no exceptions. After that, your file will be closed." He walked to the door, paused, then turned one last time. "One more thing, there are eyes on both of you. Not just from your people, but from ours too. Not everyone believes peace is possible. Be careful who you trust." Then he left. The car door clicked shut, the engine hummed, and the silence returned. But this time, it felt different. Not soft, not warm. Syria turned to the man. He stood quietly by the window, watching the car disappear into the trees. He didn't speak, but his jaw was tight. His fingers curled once, then relaxed. She stepped toward him, her voice low. "I meant what I said. I'm not afraid of what's coming. Not if I stand beside you." He looked at her. This time he smiled. It wasn't wide, but it was real. She reached for his hand, held it longer than before. Outside, the wind returned inside. The fire burned steady, and for the first time the idea of being bonded to him didn't feel like a rule. It felt like a beginning. The morning came with light rain and soft thunder in the distance. Syria stood in front of the mirror, brushing her hair slowly. Her fingers moved gently, but her thoughts ran fast. A white dress hung on the wall beside her. Simple, no jewels, no gold, just soft fabric, hand-stitched by him one thread at a time. She had watched him work on it every evening after dinner. He never said what it was for, but she knew. He was never a man of many words, but everything he did said more than speeches ever could. Her hand shook slightly as she put it on, not from fear, from the weight of what this day meant. She was not a gift, not a prisoner, not a debt paid off. She was a bride by choice outside. The garden had been swept clean. The table moved to the center under the trees, wild flowers placed in an old jar. One candle waiting to be lit. There were no guests, no audience, no music, only the sound of rain slowing down and two hearts choosing each other. He waited near the table, wearing a dark shirt and boots still damp with soil. His hands were in his pockets, but his eyes lit up when he saw Hirsch walk toward him slowly. Each step felt like a piece of her old self falling away. When she reached him, he took her hands without speaking. They stood in the middle of the garden, two lives changed by war, silence, and a promise that was never meant to be this real. She looked into his eyes. "Are you sure?" He nodded once. "You've never been more sure of anything." She took a breath, her voice soft but steady. "Then I promise to never run from you, to never hide what I feel, and to walk beside you, not behind, not beneath." Beside. He nodded again, then spoke. "I promise to never treat you like something to protect, but someone to stand with, someone who chose me when she didn't have to." She smiled. Her eyes began to blur, tears rising without pain. He reached out and wiped one away with his thumb. "You're crying. I know. Are you scared?" "No." "Then why?" "Because I never thought I would feel this safe, or this seen, or this real." He didn't reply. He just leaned forward and rested his forehead gently against hers. A small breeze passed through the trees. The candle flickered to life later. They sat at the table eating fruit and warm bread, laughing for the first time since she arrived. He poured tea. She offered him the last piece of honey cake. "You made this, didn't you?" She smiled. "You fixed the lights, built the dress, cooked every meal. Let me do something for once." He took the cake and nodded. "Then keep choosing me. That's enough." That night, the fire was warmer than ever. She lay beside him in the quiet room, not afraid of the dark, not afraid of waking up to a nightmare before she closed her eyes. She whispered something into the silence. "Thank you for waiting. Thank you for not rushing me. Thank you for giving me a choice." He reached for her hand beneath the blanket, held it gently. No words. She smiled again. Her last thought before sleep was not about the past, not about the war, not about her father or the debt. It was about tomorrow. And every day after. The tears that fell now were not from pain. They were soft, silent, and filled with something new. They were tears of peace, of healing, of home.